This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. My guest today, the multi-talented, multi-award-winning writer of numerous musicals, Kirsten Childs, is perhaps best known for writing The Bubbly Black Girl Sheds Her Chameleon Skin. Her other musicals include Miracle Brothers, Fly, and Funked Up Fairy Tales. For her work, she's received Obie, Kleban, Larson, Richard Rodgers, Audelco, and Gilman Gonzalez-Falla awards, as well as Lucille, Lortel, and Drama Desk nominations. She's collaborated with Charlayne Woodard on the musical Grace for Inner Voices solo musicals. She's also written for Disney Theatricals, the New Electric Company, Works in Process at the Guggenheim Museum, City Theater Encores, and the American Songbook series at Lincoln Center. She's a member of both the Dramatists Guild Council and the Dramatists Guild Fund, and is proud to be a mentor in Theater Development Fund's Open Doors program. Kirsten is also a professor in NYU's Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program. So it is really, truly a great honor and a privilege for me to have the incomparable Kirsten Childs on StoryBeat today. Kirsten, welcome.
Thank you so much, and it's such a pleasure to be on the show with you, Steve.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. So tell us a little bit about your history. How did you wind up in musical theater, and especially writing musicals? How did we get to this point?
Well, I started out as a dancer, and then I became a musical theater performer, and I was fortunate enough to work with Bob Fosse.
Oh, wow.
I did the touring company of Chicago, and then on Broadway I did the revival of Sweet Charity. I also got a chance to work with, and also on that, work with the great Cy Coleman, and Jerry Herman had a show on Broadway called Jerry's Girls, and I was one of Jerry's girls.
Really?
So, but I think the high point of my performing career as a musical theater performer was playing opposite Chita Rivera in Chicago, where she played Roxy Hart, and I played Velma Kelly.
No way!
So,
wow.
Way, actually.
Was this the original production?
Well, it was. It was the design of the original production, but no, it was when I did the tour. It was a tour of the Broadway show.
I see.
When I played opposite Cheetah, it was at Harris Marina in Atlantic City.
I see.
Harry Guardino was Billy Flynn.
Oh, so very nice. Recently I had on the show and worked with recently on a new musical that I've been writing, a woman named Lenora Nemitz. Do you know her?
Now, let me tell you something about Lenore Nemitz. So when I was on the national tour, I was what they call a chorine, so, a chorus girl.
Yes.
And somehow they thought that I had the chops to become an understudy, and so I understudied the role of Velma Kelly.
Right.
And then the very first time I went to actually play the role as, instead of being the understudy, do the actual role, it was to replace Lenora Nemitz.
Oh, no.
She was leaving to go do some other, probably television or something like that. And I have to tell you, I saw her do Velma Kelly, and literally I got a migraine headache. I was like, there's no way that I can follow that. She was sublime. She was amazing. And I remember I had a migraine headache going, oh my God, they see that every night and they're going to expect me to be at that level. It was pretty scary.
She is a ball of energy, that is for sure.
extraordinary. She really was a wonderful Velma.
Well, I've had the great privilege of working with her recently on this reading that we did of a new musical, so that was a lot of fun. And so you, at what age did you know that you were going to head toward being in the theater as a performer?
Well, I actually didn't become. What I wanted to do was I wanted to be a modern dance. I wanted to be a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be a dancer when I was little, but I'm going to be honest with you. The roles that were for little girls of color and actually little girls who were sort of darker skinned
Mm-hmm.
were kind of limited, so I kind of gave up that dream for a while.
Really?
But then when I went to college, I was actually a French major, and I auditioned for. It was at University of California at Berkeley, and I auditioned for their modern dance company, their Graham-based company,
Mm-hmm.
and I got in, and I actually was the first black dancer in their company. So it was the age of being the first of something, you know. And so I literally, all I lived for was being a modern dancer. But when I came to New York, the company that I got in was just not using me, and so I was very frustrated. And I went and auditioned for a show that was going on tour, which actually happened to be Chicago. But I knew nothing. The only thing that I knew about musical theater was what I had seen on television, because I'm from Los Angeles, California,
Right.
which is not a great theater town. Maybe
No.
it is now, but it wasn't when I was a little younger. And so all the musicals that I saw were movie musicals, but I just loved them. And I would dance around in my living room trying to be Gwen Verdon and Vera Ellen and Paula Kelly
Sure.
and, you know, everyone. So I had no idea what I was getting into. Actually, this is the funny story I was going to tell, so at the end of the show, so I have to come up with another one. I went to an audition, didn't know anything about it except for I was going to sing loud and dance, you know, as best as I could. And it was a 20 show, and you needed to sing a 20 song. So my mother taught me this song. Do you know the song Goody Goody?
No.
So you met someone who set you back on your heels. Goody Goody. Well, it's one of those, you know, you did me wrong now. Ha ha ha. You're getting the same kind of treatment.
Right.
And I was singing that song and just flirting with the director and just saying, goody, goody for, and I hope you're satisfied, you rascal, you. And I'm just, you know, being as silly as I wanted to be, because I was just having a good time, didn't really think I was going to get the job. Well, they asked me to come back for a callback, and so I came back, and I was even more excited. But this time, instead of wearing the cutoff tights and the Hermes jazz sandals, I had on character shoes and, you know, a better-looking leotard. And I, you know, charmed all of them, and the director said, do you want to be in the show? And I was like, yes. And that director was Bob Fosse.
Oh, my
I kid you
goodness.
not. I knew not who he was at the time.
My goodness.
Because I was from Los Angeles.
Well, he turned out to have a pretty good career.
Oh, yeah, he already had a great career even before then, but it was, I think it was the best part of my learning experience in the theater, because he took me aside one day and he said, just look and watch and learn and work as hard as you can. I've never forgotten the advice that he's given me.
I
and
bet.
that's what you do in the theater. You just pay attention to everything you can and work as hard as you can. And that is actually the end-all, be-all, but, you know, it's nice, though, when you get validation for your work as well.
I think it was probably quite useful to you to not know who he was.
Oh, definitely, because I would have, like, totally frozen.
Sure.
But, you know, since I didn't know who he was, I was just saying, goody, goody for me, goody, goody for her, just being as silly as I wanted. And I think he knew that I didn't know who he was, and that tickled him, too.
I'm sure it did. I'm sure he was one of those guys that when people fawned all over him, he probably hated it, and that he probably liked it when people didn't treat him all that, preciously.
Definitely. Well, he had no problem with that from me, because I didn't know who he was. But he was a terrific, hardworking, brilliant man. I just am so fortunate that I got a chance to work with him.
And so, how many years did you stay in performance? How long were you a performer?
I was a performer. I can't tell you how many years, but I can tell you when I stopped being a performer, and it was right in the middle of the AIDS epidemic because I lost so many friends. It was such a terrible, terrible disease, and at the time people were not taking it as seriously and not giving it as much assistance as they should, and so many young men that I knew passed on, and so it was very difficult for me to be on stage because it was very, very hard. So I had to sort of step away. But I knew that I loved theater too much to completely stop being a part of it. And I think that's when I started to turn to other avenues, like, for example, writing.
Were you writing prior to that, or did you just suddenly get into it?
Well, I was writing because I actually wrote lyrics. My brother is a composer, and he and I wrote songs together, and we wrote them for, he's a classical and jazz composer, and he's a great jazz musician. So we wrote all these songs for these incredible jazz singers. So I was always involved in creating music, but I was primarily a lyricist. That's what I did. But I will tell you, when I really started to take writing for the theater and writing musicals more seriously, I had gotten a show that was a terrific show, Rodgers and Hart's Boys from Syracuse, based on the Comedy of Errors. And it was the all-black version of the show. And it was with these incredible performers, Terry Burrell, who was in Dreamgirls, and Lawrence Clayton, who was in The Color Purple just recently, and just a whole bunch of incredible performers.
I would have liked to have seen that.
Oh, you didn't. You have missed something pretty wonderful. But the sad thing about it for me was I looked at all of these incredible performers, and I thought, African American performers are relegated to three types of performance at this particular time that I was performing.
Right.
We were either the one black person in an all-white show, or we were the all-black version of a show that was created for white performers, or we were doing a musical review, which was a bunch of songs strung together, but not with any book. So all these incredible actors, they were incredible singers, they danced, but they didn't really have a chance to show their acting chops. And I thought, well, I could complain about that, or I could try to write a musical. And what's going to happen is it's going to be bad. I know it's going to be bad, but what that's going to do is going to make somebody else say, you don't know how to write a musical. I'll write a musical for African Americans. And then my goal would be accomplished one way or another. But as it turned out, I kept on persevering, and I started to be able to write work that people actually wanted to perform.
Okay, so you got into writing almost as a means of survival.
Absolutely. And also just a means of community, too, because what was really wonderful was just watching these people who never really got a chance to spread their, thespianic wings.
Wow, that's a big phrase.
Really find different ways to express themselves. And I will tell you that when I wrote The Bubbly Black Girl Sheds Her Chameleon Skin, I remember being in the audition room on the other side of the table, which was really wonderful for the first time.
Right.
But all of these women came in, and they had to play the lead character. And I remember the casting people saying, I didn't know these people could act.
Oh, really?
And the thing is, that made perfect sense because there were not roles that they could sink their teeth into that resonated with them personally. So, of course, you didn't know what they could do because the roles were not written for them. So I really felt good, actually, at that moment when I heard that, because it meant that not only was I doing something that was helping people, but that I could feel that was going to, that I wasn't the only person out there that was thinking like that.
Of course.
So it was going to there were going to even be more opportunities, and hopefully for other, different diverse people as well.
And how long did you work at your writing before you felt, hey, I actually know what to do here and I'm getting pretty good at it?
Well, I took a course at the university where I now teach in the same program. I took the Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program, 2-year course, and
at
by
NYU.
the end of it, I sort of did, feel that even if I didn't know exactly what I was doing, I knew that, I could collaborate with people who might help me figure out what it is that I needed
Sure.
to do.
This was at NYU?
It was at NYU, yeah.
And now you're an associate professor there?
Yes. So I'm teaching, and also I teach in the undergrad area in an interdisciplinary area called the Open Arts Program.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can come from any discipline as an undergrad to my course with another professor named Joel Durfner, and learn, the basics of musical theater writing, and have a lot of fun, because that's what we do there.
Well, it's one of the few musical theater writing programs that I know of. There aren't too many of them.
No, and this one is a terrific one, headed by Sarah Schlesinger. Oh my gosh, tongue twister right now, sorry. Sarah Schlesinger, who is a marvelous musical theater writer in her own right. She's worked on a musical, a fantastic musical called The Ballad of Little Joe with Mike Reed, the composer, the songwriter who wrote I Can't Make You Love Me.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
some of the most thrilling music you'll ever hear. I might as well promote other people who I also think
sure.
are terrific.
You know what I think? I think when you promote other people, you're just bringing good karma to yourself.
Oh, well, okay, I'll take that.
That's how I think of it. So, and so as you started to write musicals, when you were at NYU, what did you learn that was like suddenly opened your eyes to, wait a minute, here's how you really get to do this?
Well, I think that the thing that I remember about what I really loved about being there in that room with all those other people was everybody wanted to write a musical, and nobody wanted to write a musical the same way, but we all had to help each other. So to try to find language to help other people understand what they needed to do with the musical that they were creating, I think that was the most helpful thing, because it allowed you to take in critique and criticism,
mm-hmm.
and then sort of process it your own way. And then when you were, when you used that critique to make it work for you the best way, that's a really hard thing to do, because a lot of writers, when you're writing something, gosh, you're giving from your soul, and
sure.
it's, you're vulnerable, and you're, shaking like a leaf inside, oh my gosh, I'm exposing myself to everyone. And so when you hear critique, a lot of the time you're not hearing the critique, actually. You're hearing, I'm bad, this isn't working, and I'm worthless. And just to be able to get beyond that, to actually hear what people are saying and know that they're only trying to help you, and hopefully they're only trying to help you.
Well, it's virtually impossible to get to that point that you're talking about when you're working all alone in a room. You need those other people.
But at NYU, I got to work with a lot of other people. So,
and that, I'm sure that you took inspiration from that and solace from it too.
Yeah. So that was the one thing that I was able to really get. And so actually when I am working by myself, it is a little more difficult, because
sure.
You can't be objective as you'd like. But ultimately, in any musical, you have to collaborate with people.
Definitely.
So in this, say for example, this particular musical that I just did, Bella and American Tall Tale, I'm working with this incredible director, Robert O'Hara, and Robert wouldn't let me get away with anything. He's like, okay, wait a minute, what does this mean and why is this here? And I'd have to actually, figure out why or let it go,
Yes, that is the process, and it is, it can be very, what's the right word? It can be mind-numbing that you think you've got it right, and then somebody points out the error of your ways, and off you go to the races in a different direction.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that the most exciting thing is the mistakes and the pitfalls.
Definitely.
And all of that, to see how you can get around them, and not getting around them sometimes. What is it? What Alexander Graham Bell did? Something spilled on something, and he said, "Watson, come here, I want you." Anyway,
exactly.
That's the lore. So it was a big accident, But then, the telephone was created. All those kinds of things are.
George Bernard Shaw, in his slightly misogynistic way, once said, "A man who makes no mistakes makes nothing at all."
Yeah.
So,
and I agree with him.
So it should be a man or a woman who makes no mistakes, but that's the quote. But
well, he was talking then.
Is correct.
I'm not mad at him.
Well, good, because he wouldn't be mad at you either.
I don't think he would.
No, I don't think so. Were you, when you were at the program in NYU and you were growing in that way, were you the only black person in the room then?
No. And what's interesting is that there was someone else who was African American, who actually is a fantastic composer, and then was the musical director for the Bubbly Black Girl Sheds Her Chameleon Skin at Playwrights Horizons back then. His name is Fred Carl, and he's a terrific composer in his own right. He worked on a piece called A Clockwork Orange that was done in England a couple of years ago. He's extraordinary. He was there. There was a Native American man. There was a Latino man, and I'm trying to think who else was there. There were plenty of women. For that time period, it was really quite extraordinary how diverse our classroom was.
That must have been very exciting just to see that.
Well, what's interesting is, I guess, I'm from Los Angeles. I lived in Berkeley. I went to school in Berkeley. I came to New York. That just seemed to be the norm to me. I mean, I wasn't coming from somewhere that was really like, all one type of person.
Sure.
So I was, seemed kind of standard, kind of normal. But now I'm realizing what a wonderful thing it was, in retrospect, how actually extraordinary it was to have that
truly extraordinary, because forever you wouldn't find anybody of color of any kind in the theater. It was almost exclusively a province of white people.
Well, that part is true, and I will say when we started to cast our shows, our particular cycle of students, it was very difficult to get people of color, not because they didn't exist, but because people just never were thinking in that direction.
Sure, of course.
So now, it's much more, common. But you're right. It was. We didn't think we were doing anything outlandishly different. But I guess other people looking at that program might have thought, wow, they're really taking chances, and thank God they did.
Well, that's right. Thank God they did is right. I mean, the world needs to expand in that way. So, all right. So, beyond you've gotten your training, and you've started. And at some point, the training wheels come off, and you start really doing your thing. When you get an idea for a new show, like when you got the idea for Bubbly Black Girl, where did you start? What is your process? Where do you begin when you have an idea?
Okay, well, each of us is different.
Sure.
But I will say that Bubbly Black Girl was the beginning of my even comprehending that I was a composer, because I did all three on that show.
Book, music, and lyrics.
Book, music, and lyrics, and of course it is sort of loosely based on my life. So I am quite an expert on that, I will say.
Probably more expert than anyone else.
And part of the reason that I wrote it is because you do get intimidated sometimes by all the input that other people have on your work. And I started to write this, number one, because I needed to exorcise some demons, but also I knew that no matter how much dramaturgy I would get, I would have the final say, and no one was going to mess up my story because I am the one who knows my story well. So it was actually a bit of a protective thing to do that. But I will also tell you that because I had collaborated with my brother as a songwriter, as a lyricist to his compositions, I never had composed anything. But I didn't realize that when I was working on songs with my brother, that actually was composition, because what he would say is, how do you hear these lyrics? And I would literally sing him how I heard the lyrics, which was actually literally a song. And then what my brother would do would go, oh, I see, that's a jazz ballad, or that's a march, or that's a lullaby. And then he would process that into other music that was incredible. I have to brag on my brother a little. His name is Billy Childs, and he's just garnered 2 Grammy nominations for some songs that he's done. But he would come up with these incredible melodies that had nothing to do with my melodies, but they had something to do with the rhythm or the feel of how I was singing.
Well, you were thinking musically as well as lyrically.
Exactly. But I never realized that was actually composing. So, funny story, when I first got to NYU, I had some lyrics, and the professor said, okay, you work with this composer. And the composer said, how do you hear these lyrics? And I started singing them. And I never worked with that composer during the rest of the time I was there, because they were in high dudgeon that I would dare to
How
dictate.
dare you?
And I didn't realize I was dictating. I was just, communicating like how I communicated with my brother,
Well, so. How do composers, composers certainly must realize that when a lyricist writes lyrics before there are notes, that they must be hearing something in their head.
Right, but they don't want to hear the notes. They might want to hear the rhythm, but they don't want to hear the notes, and I can't say that as I blame them now that
sure.
I know better.
And what do you play the piano, or do you just hum it out, or how do you do it?
Well, here's the thing. This is how I started to write The Bubbly Black Girl. So I started to, I wanted to write about these issues that had been, irking me and puzzling me since I was a child. And what I would do is I would take a boombox and I would put a tape in, press record, and sing a melody line. And then I would take another boombox while playing the first melody line, put a tape in the other one, press record, and as the first melody played, I would record myself harmonizing with the first melody. Then I would do that and bounce back and forth until finally, maybe like 6 melody lines later, I'd have a lot of tape hiss, but I'd have the sound I wanted. And that was how I wrote many of the songs in The Bubbly Black Girl, but definitely there's a song called The Skate that was one of the first songs that I wrote, another one called Sticks and Stones that was done the same way. And I had taken piano lessons when I was a little kid, but I was not, I wasn't fluent in, I wasn't a pianist. So, but I could read music. So I taught myself how to notate. And I was at NYU around all these composers, so they would give me tips. They would give me theory tips. And then Finale, the program, came out, the music program.
Yes.
And I learned how to navigate the Finale music program. And subsequently, I would learn more and more about theory, and I would learn more about Finale, and I would learn more about, how I could do things pianistically. But the one thing that was the constant thread was the contrapuntal harmonic soundscape that I create.
That's fascinating. I mean, what you just proved is you don't need to be an actual musician to create a musical.
Well, what you have to do is you have to want to do something so badly that you figure out a way to do it. My motto is necessity is the mother of invention. It's what carried me into writing about, people of color, because there was a need, and instead of boo-hooing, figure out how to do it, you know. That's been my motto my whole life. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Well,
it's doggone if you don't invent some fun stuff while you're doing that.
That attitude is what pushes everything forward.
I think so. I hope so.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, if you go back to your Alexander Graham Bell that you were talking about already, if he didn't push forward on what his notions were, he would have just sat in a corner and done nothing. So,
exactly.
So you took the initiative to say, you know what, I'm not an instrumentalist, but you know what, I have these concepts in my head, and I'm going to figure out a way. Now, you had a kind of in a weird way, an instrument which were the tape recorders, the boom boxes.
Yes, but the thing is, I didn't, they were there. Something else would have been there. I would have figured it out.
Sure you would.
If it needed to be done, I would have figured it out just because I wanted it that badly.
I think that is clearly evident and telling about creativity, and when people, as you say, really have a concept and they don't just. I mean, I know you've heard lots of people in your life say, I want to be a writer. And when people say that to me, I always say, well, go write. Just go do it.
Yeah,
and that's what you were doing, is you were just doing it.
Yeah, I mean, and well, I will say that the composer that didn't want to work with me ended up actually being my musical director, Fred Carl. We, since then we actually have worked on some things together, but he actually was somebody who did push me, because I did say, I have all this music in my head. What should I do? No one's doing it like me. And he was like, well, then do it yourself. And I will say, is sometimes you don't really think about it, until someone kind of kicks you in the butt, and then you go, you know what, you're right. So sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and someone else points it out to you, and then sometimes you can do it yourself. But whenever you get the opportunity, whether it's a kick in the butt or it's just your own incentive, do it.
So do you? Okay, so now you wrote that show, which was more or less based on your story, correct?
Yes.
And just not as too much of a sidebar, but the one that I'm working on right now is with a female composer named Carla Bianco, and it's it's a 2-character story that features 2 women, and the beauty part about it is it's based on Carla's life. So I'm doing something similar right now, only I'm the outsider looking in and trying to help, shape it and so on.
Well, I have to say that is awesome, and I think it's really. I will say, when people came in and did give me, could sort of be a little distant from it.
Helps.
She should be so happy that she has you.
Well, sure, because like you say, when you're in there deep, you really do get lost in the forest for the trees. And
oh my goodness, if I could tell you about the many songs, well, some of them are still there, but many had to go, and
of course.
That's another thing I will say. I don't know if that's something I should say at the end, but if something has to go, let it go. And you know what? It might come back, but you've got to be able to what is it, kill your darlings?
That's it, kill your darlings. That was William Faulkner said that you have to be willing to kill your darlings.
Yeah, because
and that's true.
Because that means you have to have faith that you have other beautiful things inside you to say.
Oh, for sure. And if you have that kind of creative drive and ambition, more is sitting there. It's just a matter of digging it out.
I think so, yeah.
And okay, so now you've obviously written other shows. Are they based on you too, or have you written things based on completely things that aren't from you at all?
Well, I have, everything that I've written has something to do with, my worldview, or either my worldview or somebody who in my world who I've witnessed who has inspired me. I will say Miracle Brothers had to do with some family issues from a long time ago in my family's sort of my family history, not directly contemporarily, not with my parents, but sort of with my grandparents and then with my great grandparents. so there was something of interest in that I was sort of expressing through Miracle Brothers. Funked Up Fairy Tales, and I'm very impressed with the fact that you emphasized the right, you spoke it properly.
Well, I tried to say it earlier today, and I realized I better be careful how I say this, or it's going to sound like something else.
Well, it actually, you said this in the bio, that I am a proud participant in the Theater Development Fund Open Doors program.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is you have high school kids in the New York area. Wendy Wasserstein, the late, great Wendy Wasserstein, said that it is every New York school child's right to theater. And so she started with just one high school, and James Lapine and Bill Finn, and she took some kids to the theater, and they discussed a whole season of shows that they took the kids to see. And now it's grown to a whole bunch of different people mentoring, theater artists mentoring all these high school students. And I take these kids from, these students from Fannie Lou Hamer High School in the Bronx every year, and I've been doing it for years, and I just love it because the students come there, they have different expectations than a lot of, theater goers, and they have definite opinions about things. And, the one thing about students is they just need to be heard. And so I just let them, I just listen to them, and they have the most incredible observations about what the theater is saying. And I will say that at the beginning of the time, they don't think that theater is for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're students of color, and they're not gazillionaires, and they think that theater is just for rich old white people. I mean, they have these journals, and that's what they say. And by the end of a season, they understand the universality of the experience of all of the different shows that they go to see, and it's so wonderful. It's amazing. But also, have definite opinions about what they like and what they don't like, and there's a lot of wonderful back and forth. Well, I remember being in the room with a lot of the students, and I just loved their energy. And so Funked Up Fairy Tales is basically the story of three best friends who are graduating high school. The only thing is they're magical fairies, and it's Fairyland Academy.
Huh. Fairyland Academy?
Fairyland Academy, and they have to guide characters in the fairy tales to a happy ending to pass their exams. And one of them is, so smart, she aces everything. One of them can't tell a fairy tale to save her life, and then the other has fairy do-gooder disorder. She does the wrong things and all the fairy tales. So, but really what it's a story is a story of friendship, and my inspiration was just the wonderful, lively feeling of a lot of the students. So that was the inspiration for Funked Up Fairy Tales. And then Bella, an American Tall Tale, is another story altogether, which I don't know if we have enough time, but I'll be glad to tell you about if you'd like.
Please do.
Well, Bella is the story of a young woman in the late 1800s who is on the lam from a crime that she committed down south, and she's escaping to her Buffalo Soldier sweetheart stationed out west in the wild frontier. And so she escapes on a train, and on the train she meets all these incredibly interesting people who are people of color because you never hear about people of color in the Old West. And so she meets these crazy, wild, wonderful characters, and it's a tall tale. Well, the genesis of the story is I was walking home, and I was heading towards my apartment, and in front of me, walking in the same direction, was a couple, and they were sort of a shorter couple, and the man was sort of a burly kind of guy with one of those tight T-shirts on, and the woman was a woman with a very, 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 very big behind, and she was very proud and, very, what is the word? She knew she looked good. That's what I want to say. she knew she looked good, and I'm going to tell you, she looked good. And do you want to know why I know she looked good? Because every single man coming from the opposite direction, and when I say every single man, I mean black, white, Asian, Latino, old, young, investment banker, student, homeless person, hard hat, you name it. Every single man that walked by this woman, and I slowed down because I had to watch this phenomenon, they stopped, they turned, and they looked at her behind like they were in awe. I was like, I can't believe this. My apartment is right across the street, but I have to keep walking because I have to keep seeing how this is happening. And, I guess other people could, pull other things out of that experience. But what I got from that is she was powerfully attractive to a lot of those men. Maybe some of them were disgusted, I don't know. But the majority of them were not looking with disgust, but with, like, Marilyn Monroe awe at this woman. And I thought, I have to bear witness to this some kind of way. Well, she's larger than life. It's a tall tale. So I created Bella from watching this woman bedazzle all the men in the area by her big behind.
That's fascinating. She was like, it was almost like a neon sign, I guess.
It was like, I don't know if you've ever seen those pictures of Marilyn Monroe and all these men around her, like looking at her like, oh my God, she is just, a goddess. That is the look that those men had when they were looking at her.
That's fascinating. It's as if, and so you wrote a story based around just this one encounter going down the street.
Yes, and the reason that I did is because, for me, the things that you see on television that tell you you are beautiful are so antithetical to what that woman looked like. She's African American. She's got dark skin. She's got a big behind. You never see that. The commercials you see are, of women with long flowing hair, and you see, I don't know, skinny women and whatever are the people who are the goddesses. And that was not true in that case. And I thought, I'm sorry, I have to write a story about a heroine a beautiful heroine who looks like this.
All of my life, it's been a mystery to me, and I suppose it's probably to most everybody. It's a mystery why some people, no matter what they look like, somehow, are like, they're the flame, and all the moths come to the flame. And other people can be absolutely what we think of as classically beautiful, but nobody pays them any mind at all. So there's something chemical about it, and I don't know what it is.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right.
It's a very interesting phenomenon. Some people just radiate some kind of an energy that attracts people to them.
Well, this lady sure had it. And I will say that the guy that was with her, I swear he looked like a rooster. He was strutting. His chest was out. I tell you, I could have gone home. Like, I took probably like 10 minutes time extra to go home when I could have just crossed the street. I was like, oh, no, I have to watch this. I have to keep watching.
Okay, so from that comes, you give birth to an entire musical, right?
Yes.
All right, so what in there, you had to contrive an entire thing. You didn't know these people, and you didn't stop to exchange information. So you went off and contrived an entire story around this moment in time. And what then did you do? What was your process to get into figuring out what that musical became from that momentary encounter?
Sure. So as I said, she was larger than life, so it had to be a tall tale. So tall tales usually take place in the Old West. And then came the realization, I know pretty much nothing about African Americans in the Old West. You hear about slavery, you might hear about the Harlem Renaissance, and you might hear about, I don't know, the 60s, But in between that, you don't hear anything at all about black people, in this country. And it was like, oh my goodness, now I'm on a treasure hunt to find, information. And boy, there's so much. It's kind of criminal that the history of this country, and I'm not just talking about African Americans in the Old West. There was a Chinese rancher. He's a millionaire rancher up in, I think it's Montana. All I know is that he is celebrated in the Cowboy National Hall of Fame that, is located in Oklahoma. But his name is Tommy Haw. There are all these amazing, amazing historical figures that we know nothing about because either they have been turned into, like, for example, the Lone Ranger is a model for a very famous African-American ranger named, I don't know if it's Bass or Bass, B-A-S-S, Reeve. I think it's Bass Reeve. And he was a marshal that always got his man. And, when you see the Lone Ranger, you're really looking at the story of Bass Reeve. So you don't hear about the history, or the history has been changed so it isn't the actual person, and so for me it was like, oh my God, literally it was a treasure trove of history that I knew nothing about and was excited to dive in. And then once I dove in to create this story about this young woman who, meets all of these people. Well, how does she meet all of them? Really, she has a wild imagination, as wild and big as her behind. So it was so much fun to, dive into this time period, learn about all these people, give them tall tale dimensions, and write fun music, write Western music and Chinese music and Hispanic, Latino music, and through the filter of who I am, So it was just, I think it was about the most fun I had in such a long time.
Well, it sounds like, I'd like to see that. That sounds like a lot of fun. It's interesting. You're coming at it from a perspective that I think rightfully so. There are very few African American or women of color women in the Old West stories. But over the past, 15, 25, maybe 30 years, there have been a fair number of characters introduced in the Old West in movies. So for instance, you had Danny Glover in Silverado.
Right.
You had, I don't know what you think of it, but you had recently a Django Unchained with Jamie Foxx, and right. You had, there have been over time, Morgan Freeman in Unforgiven. So, but they're all men. There are no women.
Right.
So I think that's a very interesting perspective that you've brought to that, and I would like to see that story. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, hopefully it'll come to you, and I would love for you to see it. It's a little crazy, but it's fun.
Well, if it weren't fun, it wouldn't be worth talking about. So it's got to be fun,
Yeah.
I think musicals have got to be, by their nature, fun. If they're not, you can learn things from it, obviously. But if you're if you're not enjoying yourself as an audience, then nobody's going to stick around.
Yeah, even if it's serious, subject matter, if you're engaged and it's sparking something in your imagination, or it's making you come to some realization about yourself that is of value to you.
Sure.
That's wonderful, it's really wonderful.
So, okay, what for you makes a good story good?
Ooh, gosh, Steve, you know how to ask some hard questions. What makes a good story good?
Yeah, for you.
If I don't want it to be over, I guess.
Sure, well, that's
and if I leave the theater going, and then this happened afterwards, and then this happened afterwards, I think that's a good story. The kind where I'd want to come back to see it, but that it would always, even though I would know it was coming, that, just to see how it unrolled, I would be, excited to see it over and over again. I think that that's what makes a good story, and I couldn't tell you because I think it's different for every person.
Of course it is. I ask this question not every show, but a lot of shows I ask it, knowing full well that it's the impossible question, because for everybody it's a little different thing. And I think you said something very telling there that's very, very good, and that is that you don't want it to end. I think that's really great. So that means that you as a writer are obliged to sit down, especially when you do something that's completely whole cloth new, like Bella.
Right.
You are obliged to figure out how to make that story in some way, to craft it so that people want more.
It's true, and that is why it is always good after a certain point to have other people step in and say, okay, you might have to get rid of that. We got to cut that. Okay, let's flesh out this particular part of the story. That's when you really need, but you need to have someone who has a sensibility and a manner that you trust, that is going to actually help create that story that people don't want to stop.
When you're working on something new, do you have a routine, or do you have a daily routine? Do you write at a certain time, at a certain place?
I try to work early in the morning, but when I'm in the zone, when I'm so in love with the piece, when I'm, there are certain days you're just not in love, and you work, you work, say, for an hour or so. I know some people who are, like, strict, and they just work for an hour every day, but if I'm in the zone, I could work from
hours,
the morning to the night, because I just have to see how the particular thing ends.
Of course.
How the song ends, and, but I would say on the days where I'm not in the zone, it would be like maybe about an hour or so.
Got it. But you try to write every day?
I try, but I'm going to be honest, I don't write every day. I know there are people, they say they write every single day, but I don't write every day. I'm not going to lie to you, but I try to.
I don't think you have to, and I don't write every single day, but I write frequently. And what I really love, and I bet you love the same thing, is what you were talking about a moment ago. When you're really in that zone, and 4 hours go by, and you go, "What time is it?" And it's just it's just gone.
And you haven't eaten. And
exactly.
And for me too, as I'm going to tell you, the most fun, because there are good guys and villains in that. It's a tall tale. I get to be all of them: woman, man, high voice, low voice, mean, outlaw, train robbing outlaw, bitter spinster, romantic cowboy.
You get to play. You get to play God, just like the rest of us writers.
But I will tell you, though, in the rehearsal room, I have no desire. I've actually seen people sort of mouth the words as other people are singing. I have no desire. All I want to do is watch the people inhabit these characters. I want to watch the choreographer bring dance to it. It's just the most wonderful thing.
Okay, so you have worked clearly with one of the greatest theater directors of all time, and being Bob Fosse, but you've also worked with numerous other directors in your career, both on stage and as a writer. What do you do differently now when dealing with directors that you did not do when you were starting out?
I think what I do differently now is trust.
That's interesting.
And by trust, I mean I don't try to micromanage everything. Like sometimes a director doesn't quite understand what I intended, and sometimes that's actually good. But whatever it is, I need to just wait for a minute and see what people do with it. And then if it's completely off the tracks, I've written down the note, and then perhaps I'll go and discuss it. But I think leaving people alone to understand what it is, what their relationship is with the work, is much more effective than me going, oh, well, no, actually, when they're supposed to actually shrug their shoulder in a defiant way. It was really important for me to do that at the beginning. and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but for me, I find that there's more organic, interesting, different shaping that is beautiful when other people are left to do what they need to do with what the soil that I've given them to grow in.
That's very interesting. And is there anything that you've learned over time, process-wise, that you didn't know in the beginning that you now repeatedly do?
Yes, I don't know if it's a process thing, but I will say a simplification thing, like less is more.
Mm-hmm.
I really understand what that means with regard to my work. Because when as you know, when I first started, everything was a cappella and, overlapping harmonies and everything. And also it was more choral, like everybody, the whole community was singing all the time, because that's how I composed. And now I have learned the value of solo numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and also the value of simplification. I don't always succeed, but I'm always striving for simplifying.
I think that is, I would say that is the hallmark of a mature artist. That what you learn over a long period of time is what doesn't work anymore, so you're never doing that again, and
yes.
and then how to pare away everything that doesn't belong.
Yeah, and it's not easy. It's really not easy.
Oh my goodness, no! It's extremely difficult, no matter how many times you've done it. And Stephen Schwartz, I don't know if you've ever heard him speak, but the stories that he tells about trying to take songs and so on and make them work, and what they have to get rid of and what they have to keep working on, that's really what it's all about. It's figuring out exactly what belongs and nothing else.
Yeah, it's really true. I think, maybe even was Sondheim talking about, oh, what a beautiful morning, oh, what a beautiful day, and how he wouldn't have written that, but it's sort of like I'm probably misquoting, so here we go. But something, like it's sort of almost like a little black dress. It's just like perfect for what it is.
Well, you're talking about that Hammerstein wrote that.
Right, but Sondheim was saying that it wasn't something that he could write.
Exactly.
He wasn't. It didn't seem like something that would be even interesting. But once it's married to the music and the sentiment is as gorgeous as it is, it wears well.
Well, I think that's the miracle of this weird melding of words and music that turns into something else. It'd be the A plus B equals C, not,
Yeah.
And it makes something just glorious. And the other thing about songs that I have really come to believe over time is that songs really are the miracle of musicals that allow us to get inside of a character's head that we would otherwise never get to.
Yeah, I think it's Yip Harburg. It said something like music makes you feel a feeling, and words make you think a thought, but a song makes you feel a thought. Something like that. Something where it does both. Just like what you said. It's just,
Well, I think that sounds sort of like something he might have said. And for those in the audience who don't know who we're talking about, E.Y. Yip Harburg wrote what is probably widely considered the most popular song ever written, that being Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And so, he kind of knew what he was talking about. I've been talking for the last hour with the great Kirsten Childs, who is both a writer, composer, lyricist, one-time performer. Perhaps you'll be performing again someday. Who knows? Or maybe you've given that ghost up.
Steve.
Okay, I won't. I'll take that under advisement. And so we're coming toward the end of the show, and obviously you've worked with a ton of people over time, and I'm wondering if you do have, and I know we told one earlier, but perhaps you have some other quirky or weird or oddball or funny or offbeat story from your career that you could share with us.
gosh. Okay. Well, I guess I could tell you one of the moments that I'm most proud of in my life is playing Velma Kelly opposite Chita Rivera.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the part of the show, the number is I Can't Do It Alone.
Yes.
And so Velma's trying to get Roxy to sign on to be part of her sister act. Chita was at her table, you know, her fancy table, her Roxy Hart table, drinking her water and eating her dinner, and I said something, and she literally did a spit take.
She just was reacting to what you said.
She just was not prepared for whatever joke I made, and it's my finest moment ever. And from then on, it was all bets were off. It was try to break the other person with laughter, and that was the most wonderful time I ever had on the stage with anyone.
And she truly appreciated that, I'm guessing.
Well, all I know is that I made Chita Rivera laugh.
So you did better than
right with the world.
You did better than make her laugh. You made her do a spit take. That's even better.
I made her do a spit take. I'm not going to lie. I was really excited about that.
I love it. Okay, and so do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip for those coming up in the business that are trying to find their way or find some success that might help them toward that?
Yes. Well, the number one thing is believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. There are going to be so many people who, then it's not even a question of them not believing in you. They just don't know who you are and have no care who you are. But you know who you are, and you know what you're capable of. And then the other thing I have is if somebody is pressuring you to do something, my advice to you is if the answer has to be yes or no, then my answer is no.
Especially under pressure.
Only under pressure. Only unless you really want to do the thing, then do what you want to do. But if someone's pressuring you and you just don't know what to do, go to the default of no.
Just say no. Even if would this be true even if there was a huge sum of money on the table?
Well, if you really want to do it for the huge sum of money, be my guest. But if there's something about it that is frightening you, just say no. And if you miss out on that opportunity, if you believe in yourself, there will be another opportunity.
Very good.
That's what I have to say. I mean, you have to do what makes you feel right. But for those people who are sort of on the fence, should I not? I'm really scared that I'm going to really mess myself up with saying yes. Then say no.
Very wise advice. And this has been a terrific hour, Kirsten. And I'm so grateful for you coming on the show.
Thank you. I have to say, I was a little scared because I don't think I'm a very good talker, but it seems to me you have a great show because I'm just chit-chatting like crazy.
You're not giving yourself enough credit. You're a very good talker.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it's really been a pleasure to talk with you.
Well,
and I hope that I get a chance to see your musical with, I'm sorry, what is her name?
Carla Bianco.
Carla Bianco. I hope I get a chance to see you in Carla's musical. So please keep me posted.
I definitely will, and you know, I would like for you to see it too one of these days. That would be a good thing. So I thank you again, and sometime when I'm up in the Big Apple, we'll have to get together.
It's a bet.
It's a date. We'll set it up.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Today's StoryBeat tip. Know your protagonist inside out. The audience must identify with your story's protagonist. Viewers must follow the hero's journey from his or her point of view and live the life of the story through the hero's eyes. A story with no protagonist will likely equal confusion or, worse, boredom for the audience. Neither is acceptable and neither will make you money at the box office. A strong, easily identifiable protagonist is almost always a requisite for unforgettable stories. A strong protagonist will always be the story's focal point. A single protagonist and a single antagonist are all that's really needed to drive a story. If you don't believe me, check out an excellent John Boorman picture called Hell in the Pacific. The protagonist, played by Lee Marvin, and the antagonist, played by Toshiro Mifune, are mortal enemies of war who must grudgingly join forces in order to survive, resulting in a powerful example of conflict and tension between only two characters. The majority of stories have a variety of characters weaving in and out of the protagonist's through line, but all it really takes are two characters, and in fact, sometimes only one. See a Robert Redford movie called All Is Lost to drive a story effectively. Sometimes all you need is just one character. In most unforgettable stories, the protagonist is proactive. This means he or she cannot be a victim of circumstance for too much of the story. The protagonist must be the one to seek the answer to his or her own problem. By the midpoint, the hero must take charge of his or her destiny. The hero must work to resolve his or her goal, and not have others resolve it for them. Ask yourself if your protagonist is passive or actively searching for a resolution to his or her goal. Does the protagonist sit back and follow the lead of others, or does he or she lead the way and tell others what to do? Active characters almost always trump passive ones. And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a comment on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great episodes to you. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.